Can you install a Boss V-XT plow on a Ranger without paying a dealership or a shop? Well, I did, and I'm going to show you guys how I fully assembled this, wired it, put the mounting bracket on, and installed it on my Polaris Ranger. So I was originally quoted $6,100 for this plow, but I called around and I found a guy that would sell it to me for $4,940. He said he would drop everything on it with a forklift. So when I got it home, I just had to figure out a way to get it off the trailer. So I decided to use the Ranger to help me get this thing off the trailer. So I just hooked up a ratchet strap, then I used the winch. It's nice, the Ranger has a wireless controller for the winch, so I just push the button and I can pull the thing right off the trailer with ease. I actually didn't think it was going to work as smoothly as it did, but it actually worked really nice. This box contains the coupler unit, the push frame, hydraulic cylinders, multiple lines, and the snow guides. Also have multiple other boxes. This one is the Polaris Ranger bracket and the mount that the push frame assembly actually attaches to. Another box of hardware. This is the Smart Hitch 2, which you have to install this extra hose, wiring. It's got the toggle switch and sticker. That all needs to get installed. This is the Plow controller. And I'll put all these part numbers in the description. And this is the wiring kit. Technically, on this one, you would need the wiring kit extension, but I just made my own extension kit. But these are the wires that you need. But I would also recommend buying the wiring kit extension. You're also going to need 2 quarts of Boss high performance hydraulic fluid. It takes 2 quarts. Here's another look at the controller out of the packaging. It's pretty cool. It's got on-off switch and all the controls for the V-Plow. Here's the 2 halves of the V-blade. Here's a better look at what's in this big box. So you got the push frame assembly, you got the springs, hardware, cylinders, instructions, the guides, the hoses, coupler unit, big box. Got some extra power ground cable, some ends, and shrink wrap to put on the ends of it. That's for the pulse bar for the Ranger. A block, fuse block, ground block, toggle switch because I'm going to put LED lights on it. It's actually pre-wired for lights. This is for the positive and negative terminal on the battery for the Ranger. It's got a stud, and then I got some hydraulic Loctite. That's what Boss recommends. Here's the springs, hydraulic cylinders, hoses. This was all in that big box and the instructions. So now let's get this stuff out of the box and let's start putting some stuff together. So I hurt my back, so I decided to use this winch to lift all this stuff up. You can probably lift this all by hand. Altogether, the whole thing weighs 400 pounds, but I didn't want to risk hurting myself, so I got this winch. I welded it to a engine hoist, and I just used it to help me out around the shop. We're going to start off by installing the Smart Hitch 2. So looking at the instructions, first thing we're going to need to do is remove this cover. There's 2 screws at the top, one right here, right here. So you unscrew those real quick, and then this cover pops right off. Next, we remove the plug from the face of the manifold, and then we install the attachment valve. After the attachment valve's in, you need to place the valve coil over the attachment valve stem. Be sure to put it the proper way. I looked at the way that these ones were, and I just copied. Do not over tighten the coil nut. The valve will damage if the nut is over tightened. Place this on the valve stem and tighten it to what's specified in the instructions. Next, I'm going to wire this thing up. I'm going to follow the diagram that's on this hydraulic tank. It's nice because everything's color coded to make it pretty simple to follow along. I'm just going to do 1 wire at a time so it doesn't get too overwhelming. But just disconnect orange, plug orange in, plug it to the back of the switch. It shows you all right on the tank. Once you got everything wired up, there's a hole in the side of the unit and you can just stick the switch right through it. It has a rubber cover that is just going to screw right onto the end of it, and there's also a sticker. Now I'm going to install this 90-degree swivel fitting, but first I need to remove the plug from the top of the valve manifold. Now that the plug's removed, I can install this 90-degree fitting, and you want to face it towards the lift cylinder. After you get this fitting on, now it's time to start putting the actual plow together. I'm going to pick up each section and place them on this mat. Next, you want to lay both the blade halves face down and make sure these hinges line up and the blade edges are even. I could not get the hinge to line up because the blade edge was actually too high and hitting the bottom of the hinge. So I had to loosen up all the bolts and move the whole edge down a little bit to get the hinges to line up. After that's all lined up, now it's time to grab the coupler assembly, and then we're going to position it over the blades and line it up with the hinge bushings. You want to pull that center pin out first, because once you get it lined up, then you slide that center pin through it all. The pin pushes right in. Then you put the screw provided with some Loctite on it and torque it to the specifications provided in the instructions. Next, we'll flip the plow up and we'll start putting the hydraulic cylinders on. Put them on the center section first, torque them down to what's specified in the instructions, and then install them on each blade half and torque those down to what's specified in the instructions as well. Now we'll get both springs installed. It says to tighten them until there's 1/32 space between each spring coil. Repeat this process for both sides. Now it's time to attach the push frame assembly to the coupler assembly. It's going to be 2 pins, 2 flat washers, and 2 cotter pins. We can get each side marker installed on each side of the plow. Now it's time to get the hoses installed on the lift cylinders. First you want to remove the bottom plug, and then you want to install the swivel fitting. It says use Loctite 554 on it. That's what Boss recommends. But you get the bottom plug, then you put the swivel fitting in, and then you put the hose on. I don't use any Loctite on the hose, just the swivel fitting. Just tighten it, everything securely. Don't over tighten anything. Now you remove the plug from the top of the hydraulic cylinder if you have the Smart Hitch 2 option. If not, you're supposed to put a breather plug in there. But this one has the Smart Hitch 2 option, so I'm going to install the Smart Hitch 2 line now. Remove the plugs from each cylinder on each blade half. Then we can install both the hydraulic lines on both the hydraulic cylinders. Now we can get the lift cylinder put in. It's held in with the cotter pin and a pin. Then we can lower the push frame assembly and start hooking up all the hydraulic hoses to the manifold. Just follow the instructions. There's a diagram that shows the way to route each hydraulic line so they don't get in the way of anything, and just make sure nothing's binding or kinked. Once you have all the lines on there where they're supposed to go, then you can get everything all tightened up. This is the wiring kit that comes with the Boss Plow. I recommend ordering the wire extension kit as well. Let's start by removing the hood. Let's get the window popped open, and let's plan out how we're going to wire this thing. I'm going to make a metal piece and bolt the solenoid and ground block right into these locations. I'm going to feed the power and ground cables from the battery up through the passenger side under this fairing, and then I'm going to run all the wires for the remote and everything through that grommet right there for the headlight switch. And I'm going to run the power, ground, and the actual plug through that hole right there that goes to the plow. So let's start by removing some of these plastic pieces so we have access to that grommet back there. Here's a quick view at where we're going to put the switches for the headlights. And here's where the battery is on the Ranger. This is a 2025 Polaris Ranger Northstar Premium. Got the ground, positive. So let's get these trim pieces removed. Just a Torx bit and a couple push pins. So unscrew these, that's where the window clips into. Pull those clips out, then this just pulls right out, and now you have access to that grommet for under the hood in between those snorkels. Now let's get this little control panel out of here. It's just 2 push pins underneath and then some tabs up top. We need this out because we're going to put the switches in for the headlights. So those 2 fake switch covers, we're going to pop those out after we get this trim off. And then you just push in and then push out. Pretty simple. It's hard to do one hand, so I had to use both hands, but you just push them in and they come right out. Those are the little covers. And then here's the new switches. I got these off Amazon. They're just on-off switches, no lights or nothing printed on them. But here's a little look at just the part number if you want to search them up and who makes them. I'll also have all the part numbers and stuff in the description, so if you want to look in there. I made this bracket real quick. I put the solenoid to it. I'm also going to attach the ground block, but I just wanted to use the existing holes that were under the hood. I didn't want to drill new holes or anything, so I just bolted this to the tabs and holes that were already there. Try to make a cleaner looking install. Just painted it black real quick. Now we're going to remove the floor. Well, we're going to move the center section of the floor in the Ranger. It's about 8 clips. This thing just pulls out and it gives you access to the battery all the way up to the front of the Ranger, so we can run the power and ground cable. I'm also going to be running some extra cables because I'm going to run a reverse light, but I'm not really going to talk about the reverse light in this video. That's why I got 2 switches, and you're going to see some extra wiring, but those aren't part of the Plow kit. Once you get the clips out, you just pull up on it on both sides, and then it should slide right out. Let's grab the main wire harness that came with the Plow. This plug is what plugs into the Plow. These go to the solenoid, and this is the power, ground, and keyed power. We're going to plug those into the pulse bar. And then this is for the Plow controller, and then these are the wires that go to the back of the switch. So we're going to feed the Plow controller wire and the wires that go to the switch inside the cab. You can see in here we got it through that grommet. We'll just pull it through. Now I got it all the way through. So we can run these 2 wires to the back of the switch, and the other one I'm going to run down towards the floor. These just plug right into the back. I'll have it come out about right here. Now that we got those wires all routed, we can move to the underside of the hood. We're going to hook up these 2 wires to the solenoid. There's a ground and a power. It says in the instruction it don't matter which one goes to which terminal. There's 2 small terminals. But be sure to read the instructions and follow what they say. Next, I'm going to take the relay and secure it under the hood. I'm using a pre-drilled hole that's already under the hood, and I'm just using a plastic clip. You can use a screw or whatever you need to. I just don't want the thing bouncing around underneath it. I ordered a pulse bar connector off Amazon so it can plug right into the pulse bar. These wires technically are supposed to run right to the battery. There's a red and a brown for power and ground. And there's also a 3rd wire for keyed ignition source. But I'm going to hook these up to the pulse bar, so you guys do it however you want to do it. That's just the way I did it. Now make sure all the wires are tucked away nicely. I'm going to put everything into a wire loom just to make it look more factory, and make sure everything's out of the way of anything, any moving parts or any suspension components or anything. Now we can get the ground cable hooked up. This is going to go right to the battery. So one side's going to go to a grounding block, which I put next to the solenoid on a metal bracket that I made. Then we're going to run it from the grounding block, and there's already a hole where the headlight wires come through on the inner wheel well. So we're going to come through that hole and then along the frame and zip tie it up and make sure it's away from all the shocks and any moving components or hot hoses or anything, away from the coolant lines. And then you can see a little bit of light right there. That's where we removed that panel on the floor. So I'll just run right through. You follow that along and you can get it right up to the battery. Now we're going to run the power. I recommend buying the Boss extension kit, the power extension kit. I made my own. I just ordered the stuff off Amazon, so you can do whatever you want to do. But same thing, you run the power from the solenoid down through, run it through the same hole, because this can go directly to the battery as well with an inline fuse. Zip tied up to the frame. I just ran it the same spot I ran the ground wire. It's easier to see this one because it's red, but away from all the coolant lines, AC lines, through the floor. And I just follow that big wire that they already have from Polaris. That's the one that goes with the pulse bar. And then you can get that up right to the battery as well. I'm going to wait to hook that up until I have everything secure under the hood. And here's a quick shot at the switches that we put in there. They have no writing on them, but they match the original switches from Polaris. This is the wire kit that goes from the solenoid and the ground block to the actual plow. So we're going to run this through the driver's side now. There's a gap in the plastic that I'm going to use. And I'm also going to run the actual connector that goes to the plow from the wiring kit through that hole as well. So the red goes to the solenoid and the black goes to the ground block. So here's a bracket I made with the ground block and the solenoid on it. The wires run through. I don't have them zip tied or mounted yet because there's actually a bracket that I'm going to install, but we're going to get these wires all secured out of the way too, not touching any suspension components or anything. But I don't know the length or nothing yet until I have the plow on, so just leave it alone. Here's the plow bracket. This actually goes to the front bumper. You're going to have to drill 6 holes in the front bumper and 2 holes in the frame, I believe. So just those little tabs on the bottom, that's the ground clearance we're going to lose, because that's always going to stay on. This piece comes on and off, it just bolted on. This is what the plow actually attaches to. So that goes to the plow bracket, and then the plow attached to that. And then these brackets are going to go, if you have a winch, they go where the winch is. If you don't have a winch, they still go in that same area. But they're designed so this can be put on with or without the winch from Polaris. If you have a winch, you won't use these. If you don't have a winch, you will use these. So I'm not going to need them. We'll start by removing these 2 lower bolts on the bottom of the bumper, because that's where these 2 lower holes on this bumper bracket are going to bolt up through. So it's going to sit like this. So we'll get these 2 off, and then we'll set the bumper bracket up in place where it's going to go. I use a jack with a 2x4 to hold it. Then I put the 2 bottom bolts in. You're not going to use the original bolts. You're going to set those to the side. In the instructions, they'll tell you exactly which ones to use with 2 new nuts. And then we'll get these put on underneath to hold it in place. Now that it's on, we can get a pencil and we can start marking the 6 holes that are going to get drilled through the front bumper. So you just use this as a template, and then you just use a pencil and circle it in. Got those 2 in the center. And these 2 also. Make sure this thing's exactly where it needs to be, and make sure you're marking the holes precisely so you don't drill holes in the wrong spot. After the holes are all marked, we can remove this front bumper bracket, and then we're actually going to remove the front bumper itself. There's 2 extra bolts besides the 2 on the bottom, so there's 4 total. We're going to pull off. Just going to use the air ratchet. It's a little tight area to get into. But I hooked up my cherry picker to the bumper to help me support it. Makes it a little easier as it's just one person. There's a lever on the winch. You can flip it so you can manually pull the winch cable out, and then the bumper just slides right off. There's a little plug I have to unplug because there's a sensor on the front bumper that lets the winch know when to stop when it hits that plate. So I had to unplug that little cord, but then the bumper just pulls right out of here. I'm going to set a blanket down and lay the bumper on the blanket so I can get the holes all drilled. Now we're going to undo the bottom 2 bolts on the winch so we can put the support brackets in there. And there's going to be 2 additional holes that are needed to get drilled into this frame plate. So we'll put this on. If you don't have a winch, you have to use a spacer. If you do have a winch, you don't use a spacer. But we'll get this left bracket put on. Then we'll remove the right bolt and get the right bracket put on as well. It don't tell you in the instructions, but I'm actually going to put the whole front bumper bracket back on because I want to make sure I'm drilling the holes in the right spot. It's hard to get these lined up and know exactly where to drill it because they want to move around. So if you see I put this bracket back on, I held it up with the jack and I bolted it into the bottom. I left space like to act like the front bumper was on because if you put that up too tight, like everything's gonna be off. So I left the space and everything around it to make to be like the front bumper was there. I use a center punch to mark each spot where I'm gonna drill a hole, make sure there's nothing behind where I'm drilling. Then I drill 2 holes where that bracket goes on the frame plate of the Ranger. Then I do the same thing on the front bumper. I use a center punch to mark the center of all 6 holes on the front bumper. Then I use the same drill bit and drill all 6 holes in there. This is where the Boss Plow bumper bracket is going to attach to. I don't want nothing to rust, so I taped off where the holes are and I painted those areas. Make sure I covered all the metal with paint. Just quick masked it and spray painted real quick. Now it's time to start putting everything back together. We're going to install these rear support brackets. Use the nuts and bolts provided and what they say to use in the instructions and torque them to spec. Now we can get the front bumper put back on. Make sure everything's back the way it was. Hook the plug back up to the bumper to the winch. Get the front bumper bracket put on. Get the bolts put in. Torque those to what's recommended in the instructions. And here's what it looks like all put together. Here's the new bumper bracket. All the 6 bolts are in. That's all you lose for ground clearance, those little tabs. There's the rear brackets all put in, all torqued down. Yeah, so you don't lose much ground clearance at all. You can pop that push bar on and off, so that's held down with like 3, 6, 79, with 10 bolts. So here it is. This is what the plow actually attaches to. So you'll attach this to that bumper bracket, torque it to spec. So here it is. Everything's all hooked up. This is going to be the switch for the headlights that are on the top of the plow. Those you can buy a set from Boss. I made my own brackets and bought some lights off Amazon, but it's pre-wired for lights. It doesn't come with lights. I just ran my cable through the bottom. I don't have it attached to nothing. I might attach it later, but I'm probably always just gonna keep this hooked up. I just keep my controller in the cup holder. It comes with a bracket, so you could like glue it or tape it or screw it to the dash. I just don't want to do that. Has on off, all the different controls for the plow. But that's how I'm just gonna leave it. Maybe I'll drill some holes, zip tie it or something, but it does come with a bracket. I can show you guys the bracket a little bit later. Here's a better look under the hood. I made this bracket it's screwed down to existing, like if you look at these, there is nubs with holes in them underneath this bracket that I just used to screw that into. Got the ground block, solenoid. This is the power and negative that goes directly to the battery. This is the power and negative that comes down. I made a bracket to go to my bumper, and then this bracket comes with this unit with the covers. So this is what the plow's gonna plug into. Here's your positive, negative with the main power. There's a lot extra wire. I might cut this down and re-splice it up here just to lose some slack. But for now, I'm gonna keep it like this. And I just ran it all through an existing hole that was in the Ranger. So I got it all tucked away. It's a little bit close to this sway bar, but that's okay. Zip tied up all to this bracket. It's covered. You got 2 covers. The kit comes with all this, minus the one little bracket I made, but there's plenty of room. I turned the tire. If I go on some hardcore trails, the tire might hit this, but I don't do like a lot of hardcore trail riding with this. Here's a better look at the push bar on. I know the video kind of cut short when I was putting that together. I actually ran out of space on my phone to record. But still, even with this comes on and off. Like you can unbolt this. It's 10 bolts, 3 on each side on the bottom, 2 on each side on the top. But even with this on, like you don't lose a whole bunch of space. It just sticks out far in the front. So this is a relay that comes with the kit. I just used a push pin, pushed into one of these pre-drilled holes. And then I put a wire loom on all this. I plugged this into the pulse bar. This is the power, ground, and keyed accessory cable. I'm going to do another loom up here. I just ran out. And then here's the power and ground that goes to the solenoid. And everything runs in through here. So hook this up to this, and then this up to here. Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully this video helped you guys out in your decision if you're going to get one of these for your UTV or not. I believe this thing has attachments for multiple different types of UTVs, and check out a Boss dealership. I'm not affiliated with Boss. or Polaris. I'm just order this and put it together and decide to make a video for you guys. So please follow the instructions. There's probably stuff that I missed or stuff I might have misspoken on. So do your own due diligence if you install one of these yourselves. I'd probably recommend just getting one installed at the dealership. I think the shops I was talking to was like $400, $500, $600 to do it. It's definitely worth it. I got lots of hours putting this thing together. It was fun, but it was a lot of labor, and there's a lot of tools that are involved with it. At first I was making a list. I was gonna tell you guys what tools to use, but there's so many of them. So if you have a lot of tools, you have, you know, the experience to do this kind of stuff, then by all means go for it. But you do need a lot of stuff to put this thing together. So thank you guys for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe. I'm also restoring a 1964 Ford Falcon. So every time you guys subscribe, like, view my videos, watch hours, all that stuff, it all goes towards this. And I'm going to start making more update videos on this. I'm going to do more Polaris Ranger content too. I'm also going to make a review video, the first snowfall I get here, which will be in a couple months. I'm definitely going to record doing that, the cleanup. I'm going to make a full review video on this thing. And so you guys stay tuned. Thank you guys for watching.